Joseph Parker went another year of his prime without a major fight in 2020. And not for the first time that this has happened, but we'll get into that. Also in this video, what do Parker's prospects look like in 2021? And is his scheduled fight with Junior Fa an audition for another lucrative contract? We'll talk about it. But first, what happened or didn't happen in 2020 for the former WBO champion? Joseph Parker entered 2020 looking for a big fight after a lean 2019 where he fought just the one tune-up in Alex Leapai, which represented the first of his 3 fights on his contract with Matchroom and DAZN. But instead of landing a meaningful fight, Parker instead was tossed in with a game former cruiserweight Shondell Winters, who'd caused a few prospects issues in the previous 12 months ahead of their fight in February 2020. Winters, though, was unable to carry over that form against a much sharper Parker who took him out in 5 rounds with an eye-catching knockout. The New Zealander then declared he was ready to have a mid-tier level fight in the middle of the year before rounding out his year with a big fight. But it wasn't to be though, with the pandemic placing a spanner in the works and Parker himself making the best of a bad situation in the period where New Zealand was locked down, making a number of viral videos relating to movies, music, other things. It gained him widespread acclaim and notoriety. But while Parker's profile was enhanced, things were looking a bit bleaker on the fighting front. Parker's handlers became wedded to the idea of a New Zealand-based fight, pitching it as a possible first big fight back for boxing. However, this never eventuated, and the options being discussed for Parker centred on 3 possible names: Australians Lucas Brown and Dempsey McKean, along with Parker's amateur rival Junior Fa. The Fa fight was one that kept bubbling to the surface, and it was discussed over a number of months, despite no real demand from the public of New Zealand for it. And with the continued talk of it, the respective sides, they were slowly manufacturing beef for what was looking like an eventual fight.
And so it starts to look a bit greedy and pathetic if they're trying to extort more money than is fair.
And in October 2020, after months of back and forth through the media, a fight between Fa and Parker was announced for December 2020. In Fa, Parker was set to face an undefeated fighter who had lost to twice in the amateurs, but Fa had yet to make any real mark in the pros, with no notable wins on his resume, but having managed to secure a WBO ranking by holding a minor WBO regional title. Some, including myself, felt that the fight was undercooked and would have made more sense when Fa was more established, but it was the fight fans were getting, whether they liked it or not. And then just weeks out from the fight, Junior Fa pulled out with an undisclosed ailment which required surgery, the fight being pushed back to February 2021 as a result. And in the press conference to re-announce the rescheduled event, Parker's camp revealed that Parker had also undergone some minor surgery to remove some bone chips from his elbows, an injury he would have taken into the originally scheduled fight had it not been postponed. And not for the first time, Parker had a procedure on his elbows, with another carried out in 2017 to correct what was described at the time as a chronic long-term injury which had been impacting his training and performance. Apparently over time, the same factors led to this more recent cleanup procedure, and I'm sure Parker's heavyweight peers will note this further issue with both of his elbows. But the impact of the postponement of the Fa fight was another less than stellar year in the ring, just the Shondell Winters fight on the ledger. And that followed a 2019 where he fought just the one tune-up against Alex Leapai. And the situation now being that Joseph Parker has not been in a meaningful fight since mid-2018, and he hasn't had a meaningful win since 2017. Which begs the question, how has he managed to maintain such a prime position in the WBO rankings, finishing 2020 ranked 3rd? Boxing politics clearly alive and well given his relative inactivity and also subpar competition, starting with the Alexander Flores fight late in 2018. So what does 2021 look like? Will it produce a more meaningful fight for Joseph Parker? Possibly. But some of it will depend on other factors as well falling into place. First off, Parker, he will need to beat Junior Fa, which he is a hot favourite to do so. As yet, we really don't know Junior Fa's true level, as the sanctioning body ranking of number 6 in the WBO is not indicative of his real place in the division. Right now, he's not realistically in the top 30 based on resume, but he does have the height and reach advantages, and he does know Parker to an extent due to their amateur rivalry. But in reality, Parker needs to win, he needs to look good in the process to prove that he is still a contender of note and that he's ready for a bigger and better fight. In a way, this fight with Junior Fa, which is officially outside of his 3-fight Matchroom and DAZN deal, could prove very important for securing his next contract. Right now, DAZN is tightening its purse strings and it won't be handing out silly money to extend or sign new fighters. As it is, Parker has been paid millions of dollars from DAZN for 2 of the softer fights he's had in recent memory. It won't be willing to shell out big dollars for another low-tier fight for the 3rd and final fight of his deal, nor is it likely to re-up with Parker at the same sort of rates, reported to be $2 million New Zealand per fight. So with this Fa fight, Joseph Parker and his advisor David Higgins, who is using his Duco Events company to stage the fight, can prove to the promoters of record for the event, which is Matchroom and also Fa's promoter DeBella Entertainment, how much juice is still left in the orange. If Parker, on the back of his name value, can shift a sizable number of tickets in New Zealand where crowds are allowed in these COVID times, and the pay-per-view does reasonably well against a mid-level tier opponent in Fa, then it could really set up the next lucrative deal for Parker, and possibly his final fight of his DAZN deal could be a New Zealand-based fight. And that could feed into the whole DAZN global strategy, as well as Matchroom's stated desire to have a bigger presence in the Australasian market. So while a Junior Fa fight outside of his existing deal looked a bit random at first glance, it could help to serve multiple purposes. And if Parker is out of the mix to fight for the WBO title should it become vacant, because he's not currently number 1 or number 2, then it begs asking, who would he fight if he beats Fa? And based on the strategy that seems to be in play for Joseph Parker, which is taking as fewer risks as possible to get back to a title shot, and let's call it the Kuprat Pulev method, Parker's handlers may only aim as high as a guy like Derek Chisora, who Parker was meant to fight in 2019 but pulled out with a spider bite. And while Chisora has had a slew of losses over the years, he is a competitive gatekeeper who recently went 12 rounds with Alexander Usyk, and he's been involved in competitive fights with Dillian Whyte and also did something that Parker could not: stop Carlos Takam. And outside of a Joe Joyce fight, it may actually be one of the few and obvious lucrative options out there for Chisora. The question being, would he be willing to come to New Zealand? Now, I know right now some people will be naming a whole bunch of other good fighters, fighters better than Chisora that they would prefer to see Parker in with. But let's consider, when your recent run of fights is Alexander Flores, Alex Leopai, Shondell Winters, then Junior Fa, what makes you think that his handlers have any desire to take any risk more than they have to? As someone who has followed Joseph Parker's career very closely, I'm sure that his handlers won't take a big risk without the big reward. And it's clear the Chisora fight being made in 2019 is that they believe that's a winnable fight. But regardless, if Parker beats Fa, the lure of decent gate receipts to add to the pay-per-view pot probably means that Parker may end up campaigning at home in New Zealand in 2021. And it could be key to the next deal that he signs as he positions himself, or is positioned, for another title tilt. Likely not coming until at least 2022, but more likely possibly 2023 at the earliest. What did you make of Joseph Parker's 2020? And where is he heading in 2021? Let me know your thoughts. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.